it's never exactly what you want it to be. So every single day, what excites
Blake thought it was over, but Justin Baldoni's lawyer just detonated the bombshell that could bring her entire empire crashing down, and what happens in court next will change everything. They thought it was over. They thought the case was dead and buried, that the courtroom silence was the final chapter in a story Hollywood wanted to forget. But what no one expected was that Justin Baldoni, the man who had been forced into silence, who had watched his name dragged through headlines and whispered circles, was preparing for something far bigger than anyone imagined. And now, after weeks of strategic silence, his lawyer has made a move so bold, so calculated, it has sent shockwaves, not just through the entertainment world, but through the legal quarters that once protected Blake Lively. Because this isn't just about a lawsuit, this is about an empire shaking, a truth buried in a machine that thought it had won until now. Because what Justin Baldoni's team just did wasn't just a legal motion, it was a declaration of war, and behind closed doors, the panic is real, the whispers are louder, and the documents filed in the courthouse this morning under seal are rumored to contain evidence so explosive, so damning, that insiders are scrambling to distance themselves from Blake before it all becomes public, because in those documents lies the story Blake never wanted told, a story that begins not with a feud or a film or a red carpet mishap, but with a betrayal, one that cut so deep it reshaped careers, shattered alliances, and pulled Justin into a war he never chose, because he had trusted her once, had believed in her vision and her voice in the cause they both said they stood for. And when that trust was shattered, it wasn't in front of cameras, it was in private, in meetings recorded, in memos buried deep in digital servers that are now being resurrected one by one. And what those files reveal, according to someone close to the case, isn't just a smear campaign. It's a calculated takedown, an operation designed to isolate, discredit, and destroy Justin from the inside out, and the man leading the charge to expose it is not Justin himself, but his lawyer, a former federal prosecutor known in legal circles as the surgeon, because he cuts through lies with precision. And what the surgeon has now uncovered is terrifying, because it connects dots that were never meant to be connected, shows patterns of behavior that point not just to image control, but to manipulation on a scale that makes previous scandals look like amateur hour. And the first strike came at 9 a.m. when a notice of intent to file civil conspiracy charges was delivered to Blake Lively's legal team, not by email but by hand, and not in a white envelope but in a black folder marked confidential, eyes only. And when Blake's attorney opened that folder, according to someone in the room, their face turned white, because inside were not just accusations. There were receipts, time stamps, financial transfers, anonymized whistleblower statements, and metadata from private messages, allegedly pulled from a backup server that Blake's team thought had been wiped. And what those messages show, allegedly, is that months before the original case even went public, Blake's inner circle had already started crafting a narrative positioning Justin as unstable, erratic, and unfit for public trust. And while those words might sound like spin, they were allegedly attached to actual media pitches, influencer briefings, and paid ad campaigns. And in one message, reportedly shown to investigators, a communications advisor told Blake, "Don't worry, he'll crack, just give it time." And that message is now Exhibit A in what is quickly becoming the most high-stakes legal drama Hollywood has ever seen, because now it's not just about, "Hey," she said, now it's about documentation, motive, timeline, and intent. And the more the surgeon digs, the more disturbing the picture becomes. Because what started as a private conflict now appears to be part of a wider pattern, a system used to protect image at all costs, even if it meant destroying careers and lives. And the backlash is growing, because while Blake's team continues to deny any wrongdoing, new voices are coming forward, voices that had remained silent during the first round of legal warfare, voices that had feared retaliation or blacklisting, but who now feel protected by the growing chorus of support for Justin. Because the world is watching, and this time it's not just the fans, it's the industry, the lawyers, the journalists who smell blood in the water. And what they're finding is not just a fallen narrative, but a cover-up, one that implicates not just Blake, but those who enabled her, those who funded the machine. And now that machine is breaking down, because every day brings another leak, another recording, another email from a former staffer or assistant or consultant who says they saw too much and said too little, and now they want the truth out. And as for Justin Baldoni, he remains composed, issuing no public statement, no tweets, no appearances, instead letting the documents speak, letting the evidence tell the story. Because in the Court of public opinion silence can be strength, and in the courtroom it can be strategy, and his strategy is working because sources inside the courthouse say the judge has already scheduled an emergency hearing to address the new filings, and that subpoenas are being prepared not just for Blake's team but for former PR firms, studio execs, and social media consultants, whose names appear in the evidence. And in Hollywood, nothing is scarier than a subpoena because it means secrets are no longer protected, and the walls that kept stories hidden for years are starting to fall, and behind those walls are not just embarrassing texts or awkward footage but potential legal liabilities and reputational bombs waiting to detonate. And Blake's team knows it because late last night her attorneys filed a motion to delay proceedings, citing new evidence that requires review, but insiders say it's a stall tactic, a desperate attempt to buy time before the dam breaks. And even if they manage to suppress some of the material, the court of public opinion is already shifting hashtags, trending op-eds flooding in, celebrities who once praised Blake now posting cryptic messages about justice and truth and choosing the right side. And in private conversations, according to sources, some of those closest to her are asking how far this goes, what else is out there, and if the worst is yet to come. And in part 2, that question will explode into the open as the first round of leaked documents make their way to the press, revealing the hidden contracts, the shadow deals, and a shocking alliance that no one saw coming, one that may unravel not just this case but the very foundation of Blake Lively's power. Because the truth is no longer a whisper, it's a storm, and Justin Baldoni's legal strike is only the beginning. The clock was ticking, the silence was gone, and the courtroom was no longer the only battlefield, because while Blake Lively's team scrambled behind closed doors hoping to contain the damage and dismiss the allegations, the story had already broken wide open. The leaks began exactly 48 hours after Justin Baldoni's lawyer delivered that black folder, the one that cracked the illusion. And now the media had it, the press had it, and the headlines were unrelenting as private emails, confidential agreements, and unreleased legal statements began surfacing one by one, document by document, unraveling the story Blake had spent years controlling. And what shocked everyone wasn't just the content but the coordination, because this wasn't a simple case of miscommunication or media mishap. No, this was methodical, orchestrated down to the timing of posts, the influencers chosen, the publications bought off, and the whisper campaigns that worked in silence, all of it designed to fracture Justin's credibility before he ever spoke a word. And now the world was seeing it raw, unfiltered, and brutal, because one leaked document revealed a staggering $50,000 payment made to a digital agency under the vague description of narrative shaping, and that agency had ties to 2 well-known gossip blogs, both of which published identical hit pieces on Justin within 24 hours of each other last year, pieces that suddenly make sense when viewed alongside the internal emails from Blake's crisis team planning the rollout step by step. And it didn't stop there. Another leak showed a spreadsheet tracking Justin's social media metrics, detailing when his engagement dropped, and speculating in notes whether the smear campaigns were working and who would be next on the list to target if he pushed back. And while the public was digesting this, Blake's lawyer stood before the judge trying to argue that all of this was a misunderstanding, a PR misstep, a collection of unfortunate coincidences. But the judge didn't buy it. And what happened next? In the courtroom, the judge ordered discovery to proceed immediately and approved Justin's team to depose not only Blake but 3 of her former publicists and 1 high-level studio executive. And within hours, subpoenas were issued. The game was all mistakes, now nuclear, and Blake's legal team knew it, because the studio exec named in the subpoena had long been rumored to be one of Blake's most loyal allies, someone who helped bury past scandals, someone who knew too much and owed too many favors. And now he was being forced to testify under oath, and that scared everyone, because once the deposition starts, the truth becomes a matter of record and the lies no longer hold. And in a twist no one expected, that same studio exec abruptly stepped down, citing personal reasons, and disappeared from public view, entirely sparking rumors that he may be cooperating with Justin's team, flipping sides and turning over documents to avoid personal liability. And as the storm built outside, Blake was losing control. Inside the chaos, her team was fracturing. Assistants resigning, consultants cutting ties long time, brand partners issuing vague statements about reassessing future collaborations. Because being tied to Blake was no longer safe, it was toxic, and the public was watching every second. And as the narrative shifted, more figures from Justin's past came forward, Former colleagues, old producers, friends who had once stayed silent but now spoke out validating his claims, sharing their own experiences with Blake's circle of control. One producer even claimed to have witnessed firsthand a meeting where Blake allegedly ordered a strategy to push Justin off a project they both co-created because he wasn't aligned with her new public image, and that same producer is now under protective legal counsel, reportedly offering sworn testimony in exchange for immunity, and just like that the case went from public spectacle to a legal time bomb, and the judge approved a forensic investigation into multiple devices linked to Blake's team. Phones, laptops, drives, all now subject to review, and the fear inside her camp was palpable because digital footprints never lie, and even deleted messages can be recovered, and with every court filing the walls were closing in and Blake's carefully constructed image was collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. And what made it worse was that this wasn't happening in some remote courtroom. This was unfolding in the heart of Los Angeles, with paparazzi at the courthouse doors, protesters outside chanting justice for Justin, fans holding signs, celebrities subtly and following Blake online, and new hashtags trending daily. And as for Justin, he remained calm, still silent, still composed, but behind the scenes sources say his legal team was preparing for something far bigger, because the next phase of the case involved financial records, offshore accounts, joint ventures, and hidden trusts, all of which tied back to production deals and philanthropic initiatives that were used as shields to conceal power plays and alleged legal violations. And what the forensic accountants found shocked even the legal experts: money moved through shell entities, investments used to fund the very platforms that hosted anti-Justin narratives. And now those platforms are being investigated too, with one already issuing a public apology and vowing to cooperate fully with authorities. But the real turning point came when a former employee of a digital strategy firm involved in the early stages of Blake's campaign came forward, not anonymously, not behind a blurred screen, but in full view of the press, and testified before the court in a closed-door session, revealing the depth of manipulation, the scripts written to be leaked, the fake accounts used to spark fake outrage, and the hush money paid to silence dissenters. And her testimony was enough to shake the case to its core, because she didn't just have her word, she had file screenshots, timestamped logs, and those logs are now in the hands of the court, evidence so damning that Blake's team requested an emergency closed hearing to address potential criminal exposure, and that request was denied. And now the pressure is unbearable, the momentum unstoppable, and in Part 3 we'll dive deep into the courtroom showdown that brings Blake face to face with the very people she tried to erase. And what unfolds next will rewrite everything, because the question is no longer whether Justin Baldoni was targeted. It's why and how deep it goes, and whether Blake Lively can survive the full force of what's coming. They said it wouldn't come to this. They said it would be handled quietly, out of the public eye, with smiles and press releases and a mutual agreement to move on. But now the courtroom was packed, cameras flashing, legal teams bracing, and Blake Lively herself sitting just feet away from the man whose entire life she allegedly tried to erase. And the air was thick with tension, not because of what had already happened, but because of what was about to be revealed. Because this wasn't just a defamation case anymore. This was a full-scale reckoning, a battle, not just of words but of truths and lies, reputations and legacies. And when the judge entered the room, the silence fell like a hammer, and the world held its breath. The first witness was called the former digital strategist, who once worked directly under Blake's team. She took the stand, confident, clear, and ready, and what she said in the next 90 minutes would reshape everything, because she didn't just say they plotted against Justin, she detailed how and why and for whom it was all done, and she had documentation, timestamps, client emails, draft scripts, all of it orchestrated and executed with precision. And when she named names, one of them belonged to a current executive producer on a major Hollywood streaming platform, someone who had funded projects with both Blake and Justin, and whose name now appeared on a list of individuals who attended private strategy sessions to, quote, protect the brand and eliminate threats. And Justin Baldoni was apparently threat number one. And when the courtroom erupted, the judge didn't stop it, because this was now bigger than just two celebrities. This was institutional. This was systemic. This was a mirror held up to the entertainment industry, and for the first time people were looking at their own reflections, and what they saw was ugly, because, well, the public had been fed a story of Justin being difficult, egotistical, and out of control. The evidence now showed a man who simply asked questions, challenged narratives, and refused to play along, and for that he was targeted, labeled, and strategically undermined over the course of months through whispers, emails, and choreographed online attacks, and while Blake sat quietly, her legal team scribbled furiously because everything was falling apart and the prosecution wasn't even done because next came the financial analyst who traced the funding, and this was no ordinary accountant. This was a former federal investigator turned private expert who had been brought in after anomalies were detected in Blake's production finances, and what he uncovered was a maze of shell companies, offshore transfers, and suspicious payments that coincided perfectly with the timing of the attacks on Justin. And one of those payments was made to a consulting firm that had previously been blacklisted by 3 major talent agencies for unethical behavior, and now they were back in the spotlight because their client list included influencers, journalists, and consultants who had all recently published or amplified narratives harmful to Justin. And when confronted under oath, one of them admitted to being paid to tweet negative sentiments about Justin during the promotion of his last film, and not just paid but given talking points and content suggestions allegedly drafted by someone from Blake's own media circle. And suddenly everything made sense: the timing, the tone, the uniformity of hate. And as the judge reviewed the evidence, he made a rare move. He paused proceedings and ordered a recess to deliberate whether to bring in an independent special counsel to assess possible obstruction and perjury, because now Blake's legal team wasn't just defending her, they were being investigated themselves. And while the media exploded with every breaking headline, a new player entered the fray, a whistleblower from inside the streaming platform that had once been home to a joint Blake and Justin project. And this individual had documentation suggesting that executive decisions to shelve Justin's content were made not because of quality or cost, but because of internal pressure from Blake's representation and their strategic partners. And now those internal memos were evidence, and the dominoes kept falling because one of the PR firms named in the original strategy emails quietly shut down operations and deleted their website, and its founder has reportedly left the country, triggering even more suspicion and prompting the judge to issue a preservation order on all electronic communications between the named parties. And suddenly this wasn't just one case, this was multiple overlapping investigations moving in real time, and Blake Lively's world was imploding because no spin, no statement, no stylistic Instagram post could erase sworn testimony and court orders, and the press had turned brutally unrelenting, with major outlets now calling for accountability, while former allies scrambled to distance themselves. And Justin, for the first time, spoke on camera, not with anger or vengeance, but clarity. A brief statement outside the courthouse where he said simply, "Truth is not just a defense. It is a right, and I intend to exercise it fully." And that sentence hit like a shockwave across Hollywood, because behind the scenes more names were being discussed, more projects, more campaigns. And as the court reconvened and the judge returned, the entire room knew something had shifted, because he announced that due to the complexity and severity of the evidence, the case would be escalated to a higher judicial review, meaning outside prosecutors would now begin examining whether criminal charges should be considered. And with that announcement, gasps filled the room, and Blake's lead attorney requested an immediate sidebar private conference with the judge, which was granted, and behind closed doors. Sources say they offered a confidential settlement to make everything disappear, but the judge rejected it, stating on record that the public interest in this case overrides any personal deals. And now the courtroom doors remain open, the cameras remain focused, and the truth has a momentum. And in part 4, everything explodes because the final piece of evidence enters the arena, recording that was never meant to be heard. A conversation that reveals intentions, agendas, and everything. Blake Lively never wanted anyone to know. The courtroom was already in shock, but no one was prepared for what came next, because when the prosecution walked in holding a small black USB drive, the illusion is gone. The silence shattered. Justin Baldoni did not just win, he exposed a machine built on manipulation and control. And as the courtroom turned into ground zero for a cultural reckoning, Hollywood realized the truth cannot be buried forever. Blake Lively's era of untouchable power has collapsed, and now even her strongest defenders have vanished. Because the evidence is undeniable, the damage irreversible, and the consequences are just beginning. This is not just a fall from grace, it is a warning that no matter how high someone rises, if it's built on lies, the truth will bring it crashing down.